Hi everyone, I'm Kat Kahn from Bay County Public Library here in Panama City, Florida, and we are doing this for the Will Eisner Week, which is March 1st through 7th, and it honors Will Eisner, who was a pioneer, not just he wasn't the first, but he was a pioneer in comics in the United States and in also pioneering the what we call the graphic novel form with the like true to life stories, which he did, and I focused some on that last year. So you can probably find that video and hear what I had to say about him and his work. This year, I wanted to kind of focus on some of the books that we have, the graphic novels that we have that reflect the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander experiences written by and illustrated by people from those different cultures in our country and sometimes from those actual countries. And just to show you some of the wonderful variety of graphic novels that we have available here. And I think it does tie in with some of Mr. Eisner's ideals of showing authentic life in his works. And I think he encouraged a lot of that among other people as well. Asian American history in the United States has been full of ups and downs, some really horrible situations. There was the Chinese Exclusion Act, which happened in the 1870s, where Chinese and I think Filipinos were banned from coming into the country because basically the white people didn't want these cheap laborers coming in, and the people who had already come were kind of caught and sometimes vilified and sometimes even lynched just for being different. And then, of course, during World War II, we had the internment of the Japanese Americans, most of whom were citizens of this country who were put into these camps because they were Japanese and because Japan had, of course, attacked Pearl Harbor and started World War II against the United States. It turned out that none of the people in Hawaii or on the West Coast were actually spies for Japan. And so it was, to me, a horrible situation. My family didn't experience that, and my husband's family just barely escaped experiencing that in Hawaii. Oh yes, by the way, there were internment camps in Hawaii during World War II. One was just a few miles from where we used to live in Pearl City, a camp called Honouliuli, and that's where my husband's grandfather almost got sent, but he was a little bit too smart for the American intelligence guys. So that kind of thing, and others, and of course, most recently with the COVID-19 pandemic and the major anti-Asian sentiments that have come out, including violent actions and even murders against people. And ironically, most of those who were killed were not even Chinese. They were Thai, Filipino, Korean. This sort of thing is just, to me, absolutely wrong. And I'm hoping that some of the books that we have here, if people will read them, maybe they will get a little bit better idea of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander experience here in the country. One of the authors I wanted to focus on is Gene Lin Young. He is one of my absolute favorites, okay? And in 2006, he published this book, American-Born Chinese. Now, this is about a Chinese-American boy, Jin Wang, who is being raised in a community that's mostly white, and he desperately wants to fit in. And then his cousin from China comes, and he's so stereotypically Chinese, and it upsets Jin Wang a lot, and he's trying to deal with that. And then Gene Young also throws in some really interesting stuff about the Chinese Monkey King, who was the Chinese trickster. What I'm really excited about is that Disney Plus is adapting this story into a TV series. And among the people in it are Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan, and Stephanie Hsu, all who starred in Everything Everywhere All at Once, one of my favorite movies of this year. We have a lot of wonderful stars, and I think it's going to be amazing. I saw a clip on video that you can search for online. Just search for American Born Chinese Disney Plus. And that featurette is marvelous. It shows you a lot of the actors and some of the action that's going to be going on. It is a live action film, and it looks amazing. Again, it's Gene Lin Young's work. Now, something else he did we don't have in our library, but I'm hoping, even though it's an older book, to get it in, is The Shadow Hero. This is historical fiction, but also superhero. And it's based on an actual superhero comic that was published in the United States by a Chinese writer-artist called The Green Turtle. And Gene researched that and decided to write the origin story of the Green Turtle. In this story, a teenage boy, his mother wants him to become a superhero because she was saved by a costume masked superhero when the taxi she was riding in was stopped and being robbed. And now he has no idea what to do, but we find out that his father, before he came to the United States from China, had made a deal with the turtle god. And that turtle god spirit kind of hitchhiked in his father's body. Well, his father was killed, and now the turtle spirit is in this young man. And he helps him to become the superhero. The fun part is the mother is making the costume. And it's just a total hoot, and she's my favorite character in here because she is so determined that her son is going to be this wonderful hero. It's set in Chinatown in San Francisco in the 1930s. So like I said, it's historical. What's interesting is that the actual original creator of the story, his name was Chu Fuking. He was born in Hawaii. Then he moved to the United States, went to art school, and he was working. There were a lot of actual Chinese Americans and Japanese Americans who were working as like inkers and some of the like background type artists for various comic book companies. And this story he actually created in the 1940s. And the publisher didn't want him to feature a Chinese hero, so he never showed the face. And when you read Shadow Hero by Gene Lin Young, he actually reprints a few of the old comic book pages and images so that you can see he never ever shows the face of his hero, so that the Asian Americans who read this could imagine one of themselves being the hero. So, great story that you could try. So, Banned Book Club is a graphic novel. It's autobiographical by Kim Hyun Suk and her husband Ryan Estrada, and illustrated by Ko Hyun Joo. And this story is about her experiences in South Korea during a more dictatorial government. And young people were really not supposed to be reading like American literature that might give them ideas about having a more democratic government. And so they had a banned book club where they were reading John Steinbeck. and Ernest Hemingway and other books like that, and getting into trouble. And this story shows how their group, somebody informed on them, and they were getting arrested, getting beaten up, and then finally finding out who did it and finding a way to overcome their difficulties. So this is something that you will find in our teen graphic novel section. I mentioned the Chinese Exclusion Act. This graphic novel, The Legend of Auntie Po, is by Xingyan Kor, and it's set right in a few years after that Chinese Exclusion Act happened. And it's set in California, in the Sierra Nevadas, in a logging camp in 1885. And 13-year-old May, her father is the cook for this logging camp, and she is the baker. She can bake the most delicious pies. But the other kids in the camp, and some of them are African American, some of them are white, they're children of the logging camp owner, the supervisors, some of the loggers. And they keep asking me, tell us stories of your country, tell us stories. We want to hear some really cool new stories. She doesn't know them because she was born in the United States. And her parents didn't tell her those stories. So she knows nothing. And so she remembers one of the tall tales, famous tall tales. Remember Paul Bunyan? And she takes the story of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox, and she invents Auntie Po and her giant blue water buffalo. And she basically starts retelling the Paul Bunyan stories with Auntie Po. But in the meantime, there's also things happening among some of the other loggers. Some of them are being mean and nasty and towards the Chinese cooks and other Chinese laborers. And luckily, the owner of the logging camp is more sympathetic to what they're doing. So this does give you some aspect of what life was like for some of the Chinese Americans who were still in the United States after the Chinese Exclusion Act. And this is another book in our Youth Services Department. This is called The Night Marchers, a Cautionary Fables and Fairy Tales book. This collects short stories written for this collection that are set in various places like Hawaii, the Philippines, other Pacific Islands, and all the artists and illustrators are from those different ethnic groups. And so you can see just a lot of fun stories. It's all black and white, but you can get an idea of some of the legends that are retold and some original stories, set in those places. I love the one set in Hawaii. The Night Marchers is a famous legend in Hawaii, so this is just going to be one version of it. But it's just a neat, fun way of just learning a little bit more about another culture. We even have superhero comics by Asian Americans about Asian American superheroes. This is Silk. She's one of the new members of the Spider-Verse. And she is Korean. And her name is Cindy Moon. She is a reporter. And she works for a media empire that was started under J. Jonah Jameson. Remember him from Spider-Man? But by night, she is Silk, the crime-fighting hero. This one, what's cool is that the writer is Maureen Gu, and the main artist is Takeshi Miyazawa. So again, we have Asian American characters being written and drawn by Asian American creators. And this is in our adult graphic novels science fiction section, so you can find it there. And Gene Lin Yang, I told you he's my favorite. He also has done Superman. This is his Superman story. Now the art is by some very famous DC and Marvel artists, John Romita Jr., Klaus Janson, Scott Hanna. But Gene Yang is the writer. So if you like Superman and you want to try a new story, find this one in our library as well. And a couple other superhero stories that are featuring Asian American heroes. Shadow of the Batgirl. Sarah Kuhn is Asian American, and she's writing about Cassandra Cain. Cassandra Cain is Chinese. She has appeared in some of the Batman comics. She was raised to be an assassin. And in this story, she takes refuge in a library. And she's discovered by the librarian, who is in a wheelchair. Her name is Barbara Gordon, who was the original Batgirl in the comics and on TV. But just having a new imagining of how Barbara and some of her friends help Cassandra find her way to come to terms with how she had been raised and to find the hero in herself. So this is another great story that we have here in our Youth Services collection. And then Green Lantern is another DC superhero. And this time, this is written by Min Lei and illustrated by Andy Tong. And it features Tai Pham. He's 13 years old. He's Vietnamese. And when he inherits his grandmother's jade ring, he discovers it's not just a ring. Remember the Green Lantern? Their power comes from their rings. So he becomes a Green Lantern. Of course, I was talking earlier about the Japanese American internment camps. George Takei, famous for being in Star Trek, among other things, but mostly for Star Trek. When he was a child, just 5 years old, he and his family were sent to one of the internment camps during World War II. And They Called Us Enemy is his memoir of those times, and illustrated by Harmony Becker. And she is Asian American, and she has written her own original story called Himawari House. And it's about a young Japanese American girl, Nao, who returns to Tokyo to try to reconnect with her Japanese heritage. And she decides to stay in this share house called Himawari, where a number of other young people kind of rent their own little apartments in there, and they share meals, they go to Japanese language school, and just try to immerse themselves in Tokyo society and learn about what it is to be in Japan and become Japanese. So it's their friendships, but it's set in Japan, and Harmony Becker just has a beautiful way with her black and white art of just showing some of the scenery and the rooms and what things are like. So you'll find this also in the teen graphic novel section. Malaka Garib is half Filipino, half Egyptian. And she has written, this is her second memoir book. She wrote one about her childhood, and this one is called It Won't Always Be Like This. It is still more of, now this time it's about when her parents broke up and her father remarried an Egyptian woman, and Malaka started having to go like back and forth. Her Filipino mother and family still lived in California, but in the summertime she would go to Egypt and stay with her father and his new wife. And so this is basically describing her various summer vacations over the years. And as she started being more aware of family dynamics and things happening, and trying to come to terms with what her life should be. And she just has this really nice, very colorful art. Just very simplistic, but it just conveys a lot of emotions and things very clearly and easily. It's a wonderful read. But you'll find this one in our adult graphic novel biography section. We have so many books. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them. This, The Good Agent, features a Chinese-American detective. People might think of Charlie Chan, who was actually based on a real-life Hawaiian Chinese detective in Honolulu, and in the movies was portrayed by white men. Yeah, there was a lot of yellow face happening in Hollywood. But Pornsak Pichetchot is a Thai American who has written this original story. This is the first volume we've got 2 volumes so far, of historical mystery. It's set in the 1930s, and this Chinese-American detective goes to San Francisco to basically try to find a killer. And so it is adult. There's some violence in the stories, and scenes in nightclubs and stuff like that. So this is definitely not for younger readers. It is an adult graphic novel. But if you like mystery, if you like the noir type mystery especially, and you want to try this very atmospheric story set in San Francisco in the 1930s, featuring a Chinese-American detective, you can find The Good Asian. This is a book, Tai Lung Schultz, Translator for Justice, comics biography. This one is about a Chinese-American woman who ended up working to help the Chinese immigrants who were coming to San Francisco and were basically trapped. They were kept in like almost, not really a concentration camp, but they were basically kept on Angel Island outside of San Francisco, and until the officials could vet them and decide if they deserved to come into the United States. But most of these Chinese girls and young women, they couldn't speak any English at all, right? They were having problems. So Tai Lung Schultz, who could speak English because she had been born and raised here in the United States, in San Francisco, became their translator and their champion. And so this is basically telling her story. And you can see it's almost like one panel comic per page with a lot of text. But it does, and some are black and white and some are color. And it does cover her whole life. The author interviewed the grandson, who is, like me, mixed race. He's part Chinese, part white. I'm part Japanese, part white. So I just find that this is a fascinating story because this is true life and how someone was able to do something to help some of the Chinese immigrants, especially the young women who were having great problems trying to find their way to this country. And you'll find this in our adult biography section in the graphic novel area. We even have cookbooks. This one is Let's Make Dumplings. And this one is for like all the different kind of Asian dumplings. You know, the dim sum, the half moons, and how to, you know, like boil your dumplings. And all the recipes are great because they're in this comic book format, and they show you step by step, you know, what to do. Ooh, beef and kimchi mandu. This is Korean. And, you know, the pot stickers, all kinds of great things that you can learn how to make something. If you want to try your hand at cooking Asian, we have this book, Let's Make Dumplings. We have Let's Make Ramen, and you can make your own homemade ramen noodles. We have that book at home, and my husband made ramen noodles a couple of weeks ago. Oh my, when you have fresh ramen noodles, it's nothing like the freeze-dried packs that you buy in the store, the instant ramen. This stuff was really good. The noodles were just tender and just chewy and wonderful. It's just, you know, great stuff. And we also have one called Cook Korean. That one is checked out, so I couldn't bring it to you. But that one was written by Robin Ha, who is Korean, born and raised in Korea. Until she was in high school, her mother decided that they were going to move from Seoul to Alabama. And in Almost American Girl, Robin tells her story of how that happened and her adjustments in coming to the United States, being basically pushed into an American high school, and she hardly spoke any English, and trying to find her way, make friends, and adjust to being in this country. So she did her memoir in this comic book format, and then later she wrote her Cook Korean book. We, again, have that at home. My husband makes kimchi from that, and other dishes that she has made he's been trying out. So we're having fun exploring with these graphic novel cookbooks. But Robin Ha's story, I think, is another important one because she does depict what it was like coming into the country cold like that, thinking they were here for a vacation, and then finding out, no, her mother was going to marry this guy that they had made arrangements long range, and through letters and emails and stuff, and just all of a sudden being plopped in another country like that. Can you imagine? I would feel horrible. And she really does a great job of depicting her emotions and you know, how she was finally able to make some friends and find her way, and even go back to Seoul and realize that was no longer home. That's always got to be a tough experience, to go back where you had been home and realizing it's no longer a place for you. And so she lives and works in the United States. We have several books that are set in the Philippines. Trece is a series of horror mysteries using Filipino mythology and monsters. And it's black and white. It's also, again, very adult. But what's really great is that each story in these volumes features a particular Filipino monster or creature. And at the end of each story, there are some notes written like either by the main character, Alexandra. She is an investigator who specializes in supernatural and helps the police. Her father, Alexander Trece, was the first one. And so you see his notes, but that gives a lot of the background information of those different monsters and creatures. And some of them are just absolutely fascinating. So we have currently 3 volumes of this on our shelves. I believe it's also been an animated series on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix account, you might be able to try watching some of those. Again, watch out because the content is kind of mature. And then another Filipino creator, Arnold Are, wrote Halina Filipina. Now, Halina is Filipino, but she was born and raised in New York. So this book is about her first trip to Manila in the Philippines, and basically trying to immerse herself in the culture. And a film critic, local guy from Manila named Chris, who moonlights as a taxi driver, befriends her, and he starts helping her learn about the Philippines and showing her lots of different things. And then when she returns home to New York, guess who follows her? So he gets to find out what New York is like. So, yeah. So that's Halina Filipina. Kind of a, it's not super strong on the romance, but it's kind of a sweet story. But mostly it's about someone who's from that culture but not grown up in it, learning and finding her way in it, and finding some good friends and someone that she could love, which is always nice for us adults. Another Filipino creator that I like, her name is Kate Gavino, and this book is a new one we just got in called A Career in Books. And this is about 3 women, Shireen, Nina, and Sylvia. They've all just found their first jobs in publishing. One is working for a university press, one for a regular traditional book publisher, and one is working for an indie publisher that's being run by a trust fund kid. Each one of these characters is based on a part of Kate's own experiences as someone who was working in the publishing field as an editor and or an editorial assistant. So this is about these 3 young women finding their jobs and then finding and befriending an elderly woman who turns out to have been a Booker Prize winning author who kind of disappeared from public view after that one major book that won that prize. And as they are trying to find their way through their jobs and figuring out if this is really what they want to be doing for the rest of their lives. Kate did get out of publishing and started creating her own books. And I think it's a win for us because she writes some and illustrates some marvelous things. So you might want to take a look for this one, A Career in Books. This one has really affected me a lot. Tokyo Rose, 0 Hour. I don't know how many people watching this remember during World War II in the Pacific War, a lot of the Navy guys especially would get radio messages from Japan, and it was always a nice young woman's voice who called herself Tokyo Rose and would say demoralizing things to them. One woman, Iva Toguri, was one of them. It was actually, the Japanese government actually had a number of these young Japanese American Nisei women who got trapped in Japan when Japan attacked Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, to start World War II with the United States. And they were American citizens, born and raised in the United States, but they were visiting in Japan. They were already being mistreated by Japanese because they weren't considered real Japanese. Because whatever Japanese they did know was older, from their parents' time. And some of them, like Iva, couldn't really speak it much at all. And she was there trying to help her mother's relatives and already being mistreated by them because they didn't like the fact that her mother had left the United States with her husband, left for the United States. And so they already treated Iva like she wasn't really family. They treated her like a servant. She was trying to get home, but Pearl Harbor happened. And so she's caught with a number of other young women, and basically the Japanese government had told them that they had to prove their loyalty to the emperor because they're Japanese, even though they're not considered citizens, and that it's either that or face prison for the rest of their lives. So they are given scripts that they need to read, and those scripts are basically designed to demoralize the American sailors. And she tried her best to make things not so hard, but after the war, she was the one of all those women, she was the one that the United States government decided to prosecute and put on trial. She was vilified, called all kinds of horrible names, and convicted and put into prison for a number of years. And only when she was much older were people able to find out the truth and present that truth to the U.S. government and have her pardoned. And this one is very difficult for me to read because I'm old enough to remember hearing horrible things about this Tokyo Rose and how she was such a traitor to the United States. And I'm glad that Andre Fratino, who happens to be, I don't know if he's still based in Florida, but some years ago he was based in Jacksonville area. But that he got together with some other creators and decided to write the truth about Tokyo Rose and Iva Toguri's story. It might make you cry if you're like me, but it needs to be read. So these, and as you can see, many more we have in our library. We have books in the children's department, in the children's shelves and youth services, here in young adult, in the teen room, and in our adult collection. Books by and about Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders. Take a chance and read some of them. And also remember Will Eisner Week. We'll be putting up some displays to celebrate Will Eisner and his work and what he did for American comics of all kinds. Thank you.